have a lot of distinguished panelists here and a distinguished moderator, and I don't want to take away from their time. But before I introduce the moderator and the moderator introduce the panelists, let me just say a few things. First of all, those of you who don't know, I'm County Supervisor Nate Miley, and I want to welcome you to the African American Roundtable discussion. And I just want to see, in the spirit of Juneteenth, I want to see how many people recognize this what I'm going to read to you. The Athenian Niles Club was, for nearly a century, Oakland's premier gentlemen's social club, formed in April 1915. And it was formed from a merger of the Athenian Club, organized in 1883, and the Niles Club, organized in 1896. The Athenian Niles Club was the elite membership, included businessmen, politicians, lawyers, and architects. Most of the town's movers and shakers. This effectively made it Oakland's shadow power base. The Athenian Niles Club did not allow African Americans to participate. So who do you think purchased this? The Athenian Niles Club? Does anybody know? We are in the Athenian Niles Club. So the purchase of the building by African American leader Geoffrey P. was seen as both a symbolic and a practical victory for civil rights. Mr. Pete's business, Geoffrey's Inner Circle, occupies the upper floors and hosts events every week, including jazz and other types of things. The club itself may have dissolved in 1984, but the club survives, or the clubhouse survives, with other occupants in the lower level stores. So I just wanted to mention that because I didn't know if everybody in here knew the significance of this establishment. So if you didn't know before you came in, hopefully you understand now why this place is so important to many of us in the African American community, that Geoffrey P., a black man, owns this facility that used to be the hub of power in Oakland for the white gentleman elite who ran this city. In the essence of time, as I said, I'm going to dispel from providing any biographical information on our fantastic panelists, but I do want to say a few quick things. The African American Roundtable, I started this in the 1990s when I was on the Oakland City Council. Over the years, I've held different roundtable meetings and discussions. I've been wanting to do this particular event for a while. I was hoping to do it in 2016, but I ran out of time, and then we didn't have time to bring it together in 2017, so I'm pleased that we're able to do this tonight. I know as an African American in public office the importance of having a voice at the table, addressing problems and challenges for people that look like me, like you, like us. The storytelling tradition that evolved among enslaved African Americans in the 18th and 19th centuries were in part stories meant to inspire, motivate, and encourage people in a time of despair. I think today more than ever, we need to get back to communicating in that manner. This group of panelists epitomizes a great representation of African Americans in public service, and we are proud to have them representing us at the highest levels in Alameda County. All of the folks that are going to be introduced to the Board of Supervisors, we hire them. And it's my pleasure that the moderator this evening is our retired former Assistant County Administrator, Donna Linton. Donna's a real dear friend of mine. She's been retired for a few years, but I always like to tell people, when Donna was the Assistant County Administrator, and I'm telling you the truth, all of the tough stuff came to Donna. All of the tough stuff came to Donna, and Donna delivered on all the tough stuff. And one remarkable accomplishment is, the county built a new hospital up at Highland, acute tower. Nearly after the financing, it's nearly $1 billion project. Who made that happen? Donna Linton. Yeah, it was a heavy lift, but she did it. And that's just one example. So I'm really proud to call Donna both a friend and a consummate professional, and I'm really pleased that we have this panel assembled this evening so we can hear their story. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Donna Linton.
Nate, thank you for such a warm welcome. It's nice to kind of come out of retirement after 4 years. I probably would have protested when Nate asked if I would be the moderator, had it not been for the distinguished panelists that we have tonight. When I saw that Nate was gathering all 7 of the African American agency and department heads for Alameda County, I was overjoyed. And I'm really looking forward to hearing their stories today. They are consummate professionals. They're brilliant, hardworking, and dedicated. So I know we're in for a real treat tonight. I've known many of them for a number of years. I was reminiscing, as you know, retirees always do. When I started at Alameda County, if you look at my original picture, my hair looks black. So we know all the hard projects that I worked on over the years. But I've known many of the agency and department heads for a number of years. Daniel Woldesenbet, when he applied to be the Assistant Public Works Agency Director, I was on the interview panel. And obviously, he was the best candidate that we interviewed. I've known Donna Ziegler since she started in the county counsel's office, and also Lori when she was a child welfare worker. So it's really great to have followed their careers and to see them rise to leadership positions. So with that, I'd like to ask the panelists to join me on the stage. Donna Ziegler, County Counsel. Lori Cox, Agency Director, Alameda County Social Services Agency. Phyllis Mance, Director, Department of Child Support Services. Daniel Woldesenbet. Thank you. Agency Director, Alameda County Public Works Agency. Willie Hopkins. Agency Director, Alameda County General Services Agency. Joseph Angelo, Director, Alameda County Human Resources. And Brendon Woods, Alameda County Public Defender.
Folks, at this time, I know you all want to have a photo op, so we're going to have our moderator stand here, Supervisor Miley stand front and center. We'll get a photo op for all of you. Yes. I was thinking about you, right? Right here, Supervisor Miley. Well, you can get on one end and we can get on the other end. That's a good idea. Can you both get up here? Okay. I can see you all doing this, so look at this. Look how this looks. Oh my gosh, you guys look beautiful. All right, 1, 2, 3, let's go. Cheese. Say Alameda County. Black is beautiful. There you go. Thank you very much. I saw you, Brendon. I saw you, Mr. Woods. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Well, after everyone gets settled, I'm going to ask each of the panelists to take about 2 minutes to introduce themselves to you, so that you can find out a little bit more about them. I know the program has brief bios, but the bios only say certain things, and there's much more depth and interest that each of them have. So, Donna Ziegler, would you lead us off?
So, hello everyone, good evening. My name's Donna Ziegler. I am a proud graduate of the Oakland Unified School District. and the University of California, Berkeley. I say it that way to say I'm a homegirl. What I want to tell you is not so much about me, but about what I do. As county counsel, a lot of people don't understand what our role is. So I'll take a few minutes just to clarify. As county counsel, I'm one of the internal agencies of the county. And so the department that I oversee doesn't truly provide services to the community, although through the work we do with county agencies, indirectly we do. So sometimes people call our office and they say, oh, you know, I want to know, can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? And generally the answer is no. Because we take our direction in terms of what we do from the Board of Supervisors and from the county agencies that we serve. So I like to say, to some extent, the Office of the County Counsel is a backbone and part of the structure and support of the county, because so much of the work that the county does, the County Counsel's office has been involved in it. And so today, the County Counsel's office is about 40 attorneys that are assigned to represent all the different county agencies, to handle the employment work. And we're like a full-service law firm. We practice in just about every field of law, and we touch just about everything the county does. So that's what I do. I make sure that that department runs appropriately, and I directly provide advice to the Board of Supervisors.
It's always hard to follow someone who is homegrown. So I am a proud graduate of Berkeley as well, so I have to put that out there. It was hard trying to think of what I wanted to say, and I actually like the way that Donna started it out, because a lot of times people don't really know what our agencies actually do, and I think part of what you will hear today is our journey to get where we are and kind of who we are, but what we actually do, I think, is not really what you see in these bios. So I am the agency director for the Social Services Agency. It is the largest agency in the county. We serve over 400,000 individuals every month, and we have the largest budget. My budget is $830 million, and most of that is federal and state dollars. What I would say is that my path to get here and the work that I actually do sometimes are a little bit off. I'm an administrator at this point, but if you were to see me on the street and ask me what I do, all you're going to hear is that I'm a social worker. I'm a social worker. I love working with families. I love working with children. That is my calling, and I happen to be in a position that allows me to influence policy and practices that impact families, communities, and children. So I'm going to pass it on, because I know we don't have much time, but I do want to say, I didn't really think about it. I mean, we sat there and kind of joked. I see these guys every week, but it is kind of cool. You know, we're sitting on a panel together. That's kind of cool that we're all here. So passing it on.
Okay, my name is Phyllis Mance, and I'm a Bakersfield High driller. Woo-hoo! Graduate of Cal State Bakersfield. It's okay. I mean, I was like, okay, how do I follow them? I am the director of the Department of Child Support Services. So often people get us confused. They think Lori's agency that does child welfare, that the Department of Child Support Services does the same thing. I am the director who establishes paternity, child support orders, and enforces those. I am committed to this conversation because I know it's not the type of department that people are like, wow, yeah, Phyllis. Usually when I say I'm the director of child support services, they usually say, oh, you have to work with the kids. I say, no, I take the money. They say, But I've been in this field for a very long time, and I think my calling is to really talk about the importance of child support and how it makes a difference in the lives of families and children. And I think that is really important. The work that we do is really important, doesn't always get the right kind of press, but when we do our work well, when parents are responsible and take care of their children, our future is really bright. So thank you.
Thank you. Hard to follow these ladies, but I'll do my best. So Cal seems to be a very popular place. I haven't gone to Cal, but I can tell you my daughter is. My name is Daniel Woldesenbet. I'm from the continent originally, so I represent an entire population of 1 billion people when I say the continent is the continent is the place to be. So public works, most people know what public works is. I started my public works career in California here in Oakland. I think Nate, I knew Nate when he was a councilman in Oakland. Public works is one of the interesting fields that I truly believe is the foundation for human civilization. The roads we drive, the building we're in, everything else that you can think of, the water you drink, and everything else is tied to the way engineers and public works professionals manage the system. So we add to the quality of life of everybody. It is a field that is not generally shared by a lot of African Americans, so a lot of times it's a lonely place also. So being here among you is a pleasure for me, and to share my history, my background will be an honor really among this crowd. So thank you.
Good evening. My name is Willie Hopkins. I'm the General Services Director, and I don't have anything California related, so I'm from Mississippi, okay? I've been here approximately 2.5 years, but fortunately I've been in this line of work for a very, very long time. I am a retired U.S. Army officer, and I've spent a tremendous amount of time with other governments in the realm of being a General Services Director. And that's about it for me. Again, I'm originally from Mississippi. I attended an HBCU, and my transition into this field came from my experiences in the military. Thank you.
Well, good evening. I want to thank Supervisor Miley for this distinct opportunity and the privilege of being among my peers. My name is Joe Angelo, and I am the HR Director for Alameda County, and I am delighted. I'm the best dressed department head, and I went to Harvard, so don't hate. All right. All right. Now, Berkeley. Yeah. All right. So I grew up in Philly, but I'm in California now, and I love it. And I love it. I'm the Director of HR, and I love that because since the dawn of civilization, cities, families, neighborhoods, states, counties, and countries have come and gone because of economic employment opportunities. Some have been exercised and administered equitably, others not. And I have a distinct privilege of ensuring that the wonderful opportunities that exist in this county are open and available for everyone. Amen. Try and catch up to that, Dan.
Brendon Woods, public defender. I am honored to be here in front of everybody. I am. I'm honored to be with our panel here. The best dress comment? Should be like a hand up and clapping. All right. All jokes aside, my name is Brendon Woods. I am the public defender of Alameda County.
All right. All right.
So, I have the pleasure of leading our office. Our office was formed in 1927. It's one of the oldest public defender offices in the nation. We were formed by a former DA and Supreme Court Chief Justice Earl Warren. So, I am the 9th public defender of the county. There were 8 before me. I am the first, if you've probably seen in the program, I am the first African American appointed to this position in Alameda County. So I say that every time I speak. It's great. I get applause. Woo, woo, awesome, great. But when you think about Alameda County, and this occurred in 2012 when I was appointed, think about Alameda County, Oakland, Berkeley, home of the Black Panthers, it's a little bit embarrassing and shameful to think about that it took up until 2012 that a black person was appointed to this position, considering the work we do and the populations we represent. It is shameful. Now I'm going to blow your mind a little more. I'm the only black chief public defender right now in the state of California. Right. Right. So this right here is amazing. Okay, it really is. So when I say I'm honored to be on this table, I really am. So I didn't go to Cal. Sorry. I'm not from Oakland. Sorry. I'm from New York. Okay. Thank you. I'm all about forgiveness. I went to law school to be a public defender. I love this job. This is all I ever wanted to do. I was fortunate enough to get my first job as a public defender in Alameda County in 1996, and I've been there ever since. So thank you for having me.
Do we have a great panel tonight? Well, as we've heard and as we know you have very lofty and responsible positions. I'd like for a couple of you to tell me, what were your influencers? We know there were people, there were places, there were situations that influenced you in your career path. Phyllis, would you answer that for us?
So I thought about this, and we kind of had a discussion at our table, and I had decided what I was going to talk about in terms of my influencers. Most people don't start out wanting to be the director of child support services. It's just not the field that people go into knowingly. So when I think about my career and who my influencers were, I come back to my family. I come back to my mom and my dad, because the influence that they had for me was that they taught me or lived a life that said community was important. In Bakersfield, it doesn't look anything like Oakland at all. We had about a 6% black population. That black population wasn't necessarily concentrated in one particular area, so it kind of looked different. But my family took a real interest in our community, because my dad said, people can take a lot from you, Phyllis, but the one thing they can't take from you is your knowledge and what's in your brain. So put the right things in your brain. My mama said to me, you take you with you wherever you go. So make sure you take your best self. And when you're taking your best self, make sure you bring someone else along with you. That's right. And so that's the creed that I live by, and that's the influence that I think has shaped the way I have my journey in my career. It's the bottom line conversation. When everything else fails, I come back to the conversation of putting the right things in my mind and keeping them in there because nobody can take them. And I come back to the conversation is, I gotta take me, and it needs to be the best me each and every time.
Daniel, as the only department head who was not born in this country, what were your influencers?
Well, there's obviously family and a lot of other people, but I'm going to tell you a story about my experience when I was in Florida. After so many years and going to school and various things, one day I noticed that I didn't see people like me. I didn't see anybody that I can relate with. I didn't see a role model. So I went to one role model that I know that was my boss at the time, and I said, I'm distressed because I don't know what to do. And he tells me of an organization called NFBPA, National Forum for Public Black Administrators. And he said, the city will pay for you to go and become a member of that organization and take their executive leadership program. And I'm going to tell you that's one of the best programs in this country. and it takes about a year. And I graduated from Eli under an FBPA way back. But then the most important thing that I learned was that there were 11 people like me who were pursuing a path in public service. They were well educated. I can relate with them. They look like me. And that was an influence that I had, that it really doesn't matter really who's around me. I can become a role model. So NFBPA has an enormous impact on my strength and where I am, to be able to say, I can be a role model even if I don't have one. I can pursue public service, which I've always wanted to do. So if any one of you interested in NFBPA, I'm not advertising it, but join that organization. It's an excellent organization. Thank you.
Daniel, thank you for highlighting that as a board member of the National Board of the National Forum for Black Public Administrators. I am advertising. We do need to revitalize the Oakland, San Francisco Bay Area chapter, so hopefully you'll all be out for that. I certainly understand that coming from an African country and then coming here, that it was particularly important to see people who look like you who are doing important things. So thank you for sharing that. I'd like to spend a little bit of time understanding from many of you what your journey has been like in order to get to the positions that you're in right now. I know Alameda County is a urban county, lots of issues, lots of concerns, lots of politics, and it took a lot to prepare yourselves for this position. Donna, are you open to discussing a bit more about your journey?
Sure, Donna. So I think one of the things, just sort of echoing what Brendon said earlier, I do think it's important to mention. I am the first woman and the first African American appointed to the county council position in the county of Alameda. Statewide, we do a little better in the sense that currently statewide there is one other African American county council, and he used to be my chief assistant, but he's now the county council in Marin as of about a year and a half ago. So kudos to the Alameda County Board of Supervisors for growing African American county councils in this state, because they definitely are a rarity. But my journey, you know, I tell people that when I was a little girl, you know, the most important thing to me was that nobody told me I couldn't. And I think about children today. I'm forever talking about the inequities. Flatland schools, you don't get the same opportunities. When I was a little girl, you know, a teacher, a white teacher, when I was in the 4th grade, told my mother, you know, to get me out of that school because I needed something that school couldn't give me. And of course, the school I was in did not have a gifted and talented education program. And so, you know, she just kept telling my mother they won't give her what she needs. And, you know, my mother did what a mother needed to do, and my mother was a single mother. She lied and found an address, you know, and got me in a school that could serve my educational needs. And then when it was time for me to go to middle school, she found another one and another address to get me to where I needed to go. And we did the same thing for high school, so I memorized a lot of addresses. But the reality is, you know, in high school I took a class, and it was about youth in the law. And I still remember that I was fascinated with language, and the way, you know, that the burglary was the breaking and entering into the dwelling place of another at night with the intent to commit a felony therein. And that in order to prevail in a lawsuit, you had to be able to prove every single element of that crime. And that fascinated me. And it fascinated me that I could stand in front of a room and use language to convince 12 people that the facts meant something that the other person was going to try to convince them they didn't show or they didn't mean. And that just excited me. So I wanted to be a lawyer. And, you know, that it was set. And from Oakland High School, you know, to UC Berkeley and to Boat Hall School of Law, you know, I never stopped. But the curious thing, and I'll try to stop, was I wanted to be a public defender. And why did I want to be a public defender? Because as a black girl in Oakland, that's all I knew. I didn't know all the different things that were available to me. And I am fortunate, you know, that I spent my first summer after my first year of law school working for a criminal defense attorney, and it was very clear that I would never be a public defender because that my heart was not there. That wasn't the work that was going to move me and invigorate me and excite me every day. So I, you know, went to a big firm. I practiced, you know, corporate business, employment law, and found the area of law that really did speak to me, and I went forward. And the other thing I will say is that when I interviewed for the office of the county counsel 18 years ago, because I've been practicing 28 years now, but I started in the county counsel's office 18 years ago. The county counsel at the time was Richard Winnie, and a group of attorneys in the office were interviewing me, and one of them asked me, "What do you want to do 5 years, 10 years from now?" And I looked at Richard and I said, "Well, I want your job." And, you know, and I did, to be honest, it wasn't me being cocky or anything, but I also did my job for Richard like I wanted Richard's job. And when Richard promoted me to his chief assistant county counsel, what he said to me was, "Donna," and it was a, you know, it was a contested appointment. He said, "The one thing I know is that if I'm about to step off a cliff, you're going to tell me. I might step off the cliff anyway, but I know you're going to tell me, you're going to show me the pitfalls, and you're going to be right by my side. You know, I'm not stepping off the cliff, but, but I am going to always be useful in his camp." And that's the sort of thing that I impart to people, particularly young people, when I talk to them today. Don't just show up. Show up and be useful. You know, make a difference, serve a purpose. If you're just showing up to do the basic, I'm moving A to B, you know, there are 100 people who can do that job. But when you can show up and add value, and without even trying, the people around you can see that you add value, that means you have a goal and you're trying to get somewhere. And from the day I started in the county counsel's office, my superiors could see that. And, you know, that's why I'm sitting in the big office today. You know, because I didn't focus on getting there, I focused on being of value. So.
Opposing counsel, Brendon Wood. Tell us about your journey.
Not sure exactly opposing, but sometimes. Yeah. So my journey, in some ways similar to Donna's, but also different. I think we both had similar backgrounds. My mom was a single parent. And my journey that got me to being a lawyer and being a public defender was kind of what I saw growing up as a kid. Having family members that were incarcerated, uncle serving 27 years in prison, cousins who were in the system, and just wanting to be able to push back and fight against that. That's what made me do this work, that's what drives me to do this work, that's what motivates me every day to come to work. And unlike Donna in some ways, everyone except my family told me I could not do it. I had no's all the time. That was like, what are you thinking about? You can't go to law school. You can't get to law school. You're not going to get through college or high school. And so that was my environment. I remember a high school counselor saying, "Well, didn't your parents join the Navy?" I'm like, "Yeah." "Well, shouldn't you join the Navy? Is college really someplace you can go?" And that was kind of my thing. And if you want to get me to do something, tell me I can't do it. Because that's the way my mind operates. So if I had more support, I'd probably not be as successful. But that was kind of my career path also in the office. It was always, in some ways, having to prove myself. As a public defender, you get very challenging cases, and I think sometimes my predecessors who were in positions of authority would give, you know, you're the black guy, you can relate to this black guy who did this really horrible offense, so you take that case. and not really appreciating my abilities as a lawyer, so you had to work extra hard to prove yourself. And I think, like Donna, when I first started, I'm like, I'm going to run this show. I'm going to be the boss one day. And that was kind of my trajectory and how I got here. So,
thank you. And Willie, not a lawyer, but tell us about your journey.
Yeah, definitely not a lawyer. My journey was somewhat different. Again, I came out of college, and even before I went to college, again, I grew up in Mississippi on a farm, and watching my father do a lot of things, who was also a Baptist minister, a lot of what he did in terms of engaging the community and doing things from the community, and a lot of this predated things like the Department of HUD and a lot of other departments. So he was constantly pursuing grants for reasons that would uplift the community and provide services to the community. And I watched him do that until the time I went to college. And the most interesting thing, even today, I have a responsibility as General Services Director for Early Care and Education. And I can recall when my father got funding to create a Head Start program in the church, and this was back in the 60s. Again, a lot of this predated education as we know it today. And so that kind of set me on a pathway in terms of what I wanted to do. But coming out of college during the time frame I did in the 80s, getting to where you wanted to be required experience. And the one way I saw an opportunity to get that experience was by entering the military. So I got commissioned a year before I graduated college, and I went to the Army and garnered a tremendous amount of experience because I actually started out as an engineer. And the irony in that is I started out blowing up things, and nowadays I build things. But those experiences that I got in the military, and from what I saw with my parents, both my mother and my father, my mother was a school teacher, allowed me to see some things that motivated me. But initially getting out of the military, coming to work for government was not on my radar. I was immediately recruited by a Fortune 500 company, and I ran a chemical plant for about 5 years. And the interesting thing about being in private sector, your success or failure is based on a return on investment. And after doing that for so many years, I got a phone call recruiting me for government. And initially I declined it, and I started thinking about what I had witnessed, with my father and my parents. And thinking about the return on investment, I began to think, as a taxpayer, taxpayers deserve that same return on investment. And I wanted to know what it was I could bring to the table that would yield a return on the tax dollar. And that was the motivation to get me into this field. And I was fortunate enough to start in Atlanta, and some people call it Black Atlanta, where my board was predominantly African American in my first job. And I learned a tremendous amount about embracing the community and creating programs to help the community. And that was my motivation to keep me doing what I do. And I became even more intimately involved in it when I left that county and went to the city government, because at that city government level, it's more intimate because you're actually working with the people in the city, creating those programs and administering programs that provide housing and other things that are really critical to the community, especially for people of color. So, and that's what brought me here when I saw this opportunity. That was my motivation, and that's what keeps me doing what I do.
Lori, can you tell us a little bit about your trajectory?
So we debated this question, I just want you to know, because trajectory and journey can be very much the same thing, and so I'm going to answer it from that perspective with a little bit more emphasis on trajectory. The one thing I wanted to just kind of put out there, I never really wanted to be a social worker. And so it is funny to me now that I tell people, if you ask me what I do, I'm a social worker. And I honestly believe that I am probably a social worker at heart, and I probably have always been a social worker. My very definition of a social worker was influenced very negatively. I saw social workers as people who went in and took other people's children. They were typically white women who would go in and look in closets to see if there was a man living in the home. I did not think, I will say Claudine was like my favorite movie. I just want y'all to know that. So that was my reference point for social workers. But one of the things that I did know is that I liked helping people, and I knew that very, very early on. Both of my parents were educators. They always had me in an educational environment. I've done everything you could possibly think of, including doing college tours with my father in the summer. At a very early age, I think I was 14 when I knew I wanted to be a psychologist. That was actually that's my degree. I have a degree in psychology. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to work with children. Very clear about that. And I wanted to work with troubled children. Now, what happens is that when you're in school, you take a class here and it kind of tweaks what you want to do a little bit. And then you take another class and you do an internship and that tweaks it a little bit more. And so my tweaks along the way started with young children. Yeah, it lasted for a class. And then it moved into boys, particularly African American boys. I did several internships, I tutored, and I found that they seemed to be the ones who were identified the most as having problems. So that became my interest, and I graduated saying I wanted to open a facility that was going to work with African American boys. And then I found there was a facility that was already doing that. So I worked for them. That actually helped me encounter child welfare. And what I saw, again, the typical social worker is what I encountered, and I felt that they just didn't know what they were doing. So I went back to school to get a degree because I wanted to now be, I didn't want to be a social worker, but I kind of wanted to do the work that they were doing with families. I did a stint, at least a year and a half, where I worked with homeless families while I was in graduate school. And again, I was finding that these families who were struggling every day, they go to these institutions, these public agencies to get assistance, and they're given more red tape. They're given more barriers. It's more and more difficult. It's hard to get your kids back if you don't have a place to live. And if you don't have a job, you can't have a place to live. And if you've got criminal history, you can't get a job. So there were all these things that were happening to families, and it was having an impact on children. And it was particularly happening in the Black community. My trajectory, I would say, was to come in, and I say this all the time, I tell my staff, I didn't want to work for a public system, but I also knew that I couldn't fight the system from the outside. My idea was I was going to get in there, I was going to show those social workers what they needed to do to actually help families, because I knew we could be successful. That's how I started, that's how I got into the Child Welfare Department in Alameda County. I too came in, first day of training. They asked me what unit I want to work in, what did I want to do, and I was like, I want to run the agency, so we can get through all of this. I've got things to do, and I was going to do it in 5 years. That's right. You read my bio, I've been there for about 20. But I had plans. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I stayed for a while, civil service, you've got to pay your dues. I would say that I moved quickly. I was a supervisor in 2 years. I was a manager in 1 year after that. I actually left, went and did some consulting, was recruited back to the agency, became a division director, moved up very, very quickly. And I always tell this story. I got to what's called an assistant agency director. That's the second highest level in our agency. I was there for 1 week, and I got a phone call from the county administrator asking me to apply for the agency director position. So who can pass on that, right? Didn't know what I was getting into, I will say. But the one thing I would say is it was all about a means to an end. I tell my children that even today. My son is in graduate school, and I'm always saying what you're doing, it's a means to an end. What do you ultimately want to do? And you take those little steps, and sometimes you kind of dance along a line. You've got a path, but you might veer a little bit to the left or veer a bit to the right. You might pull into a driveway and stop and visit for a while and then back out and keep on down that path. But at the end of the day, your end is what you have to keep in sight. I am where I thought I would be 15 years ago. I am proud of where I am, and I still struggle with how can I help the people that work under me understand what it means to actually help a family. How do we break down those barriers? How do we make services easier for them to get to? How do we ensure that children stay with their families? How do I partner with all of these folks at the table and others who aren't even sitting here to help us help the citizens of Alameda County in every aspect? Housing, employment, food access. I could go on.
Well, we've certainly heard how education and preparation and motivation have played a significant role in the achievements of our department heads. And when you look at the bio of Daniel, you'll see more initials behind his name in terms of degrees and certifications. Daniel, can you talk a little bit about your trajectory?
Yes. Well, yeah, I mean, one of the lessons that I learned, I don't know it's by choice, but basically growing up is if you prepare yourself, you'll always be lucky. And when I was a kid, I didn't understand what that meant. But in our household, and I have 7 brothers and sisters, and there's nobody in that household that does not have either a Ph.D. or an M.D. So that means it was not a choice. Mom and dad say, you don't have to worry about anything else but education and preparing yourself. Because when you're all prepared very well, you'll be lucky. So I thought it was, my dad saying, just to find out it's an 18th century a philosopher, Seneca, that was saying. So, basically preparation meets opportunities define success. So in our household, we, like I said, we went to good schools growing up. We didn't have to worry about a lot of things. Fortunately, I grew up in a very robust family structure, not just immediate family, but a village. But everybody around me was a family. If I wanted to do any mischief, even when I was in high school, I wasn't just worried about my mom and dad. I was worried about the entire neighborhood. So you don't start something, like try to smoke a cigarette or drink alcohol. Before you know it, your mom is waiting at the door with something to spin you up. But education and preparation was a really important element. And I'll be honest with you, I've never been one of those people who appreciated authority. I've always appreciated, like I said, being prepared. Do the best you can, and let the chips fall where they fall. And because of that, I've always been successful. I also learned from my dad the highest ethical standard you can ever imagine. And probably Nate and others know that I'll express myself one way or the other if I could influence people like Nate who make policies in the county or in the cities. So my dad said, there's nothing worth than your ethics. Money, privileges, they don't matter. You have to be able to sleep with yourself every night. So the disadvantage of that advice was I lost interest in money. So despite, I have an MBA in investments, I've worked in the environment of Wall Street, and I've seen what it means to make money, but never got the satisfaction that I got doing public service. So money was never a motivation. So I always blame my dad for that because my living condition could have been better. However, I can tell you, despite all the education, I'm the only one in the family that is working in the public sector. I have a brother that works for Microsoft. I have a sister who is practicing her own medicine. So when I look at some of the things that they do, that ethics that my dad taught us is within them. Despite the fact that they're doing these private services, they actually approach their jobs with that ethical standard of providing the highest and best without extensive self-interest. So I would say education is an extremely important element, and going through that process, like I told you before, I go to conferences right now, there will be 1,500 people, and I look around, I don't see anybody that looks like me. And I say, why is it that people like me don't go to the engineering schools, the sciences? So the only thing I could do is go to high schools, elementary schools sometimes, and tell them about how fun it is to do math, and trying to break the stereotype. That's the most important element, and it's a hardship, but trying to break that stereotype that people who look like me don't know how to do math, or women are not, good in computer science. We need to break those stereotypes. If we don't break those things, we're going to still be isolated in this professional field. So education has been one of the tools that I've used to prepare myself. I have, from engineering to public administration to business administration to public policy, the range of education that I have pursued were intentional, at the same time advanced my interest in professional life without me even pursuing it directly. So I would say I was lucky because of the opportunity. I was lucky because of the preparation that I've done to date. Thank you.
I know we all have challenges, and many of you who are the first of your kind to hold the position that you're in face challenges along the way. I was wondering if one of our best dressed department heads, Joe,
Sure, I'll answer. One of.
would address challenges that you've
One
faced.
of.
Oh, only one of.
Okay.
Yes.
So overcoming adversity, I guess, as I said, I grew up in Philadelphia, and in high school, we moved to the suburbs. So I was immediately placed in an all-white environment as the only black kid in the high school. And I remember walking down the corridor, and one of the classroom doors was open, and one of the students looked at me as the class was being conducted and called me the N-word. Looked me dead in my eye, and I was frozen. I didn't know what to think, I was just reduced to nothing. And I immediately went to the dean's office because I was a volunteer there, and I told the secretary. I said, Mrs. Wagner, God rest her soul, I said, Mrs. Wagner, Johnny X called me the N-word. I can't believe it. My life has changed. And she looked at me and said, what are you going to do? So weeks went by and time went by, and I continued to volunteer and support and do whatever I could. And then one day, Mrs. Wagner came in and said to me, very, very matter-of-factly, and obviously she was upset and she was quite disheveled, and said, you won't believe this, but Margaret Ann called me the B-word. And I saw that she was so frustrated and so angry, and I reached out to her and said, well, what are you going to do? But that moment stayed with me because it taught me a very valuable lesson. That in the face of adversity, sometimes people who you think should be your support or should be on your side won't be. and you have to continue your journey alone. So whatever journey you're on, make it a good one, because you may not have company. But when you get there, everybody's going to want to join you.
Lori, what can you add to that in terms of challenges?
Anybody can add to that? Really? Are you kidding me?
Well,
You know, it's hard to follow Joe. I'm inclined to pass, but I'm going to tell you a short story before I answer. I'm typically the first agency director in the office. I come in early to be in my office between 7 and 8. And that's pretty much for my open door policy for my employees if they want to call or talk to me. But the reason I'm up so early is Joe calls about 4:45 and asks to help coordinate his suit. And I just get up and come to work after that. So, Brendon used to, but it was so difficult. I said, look, just wear blue and white every day and you don't have to worry about it. So now you know who the best dress is, right? Didn't see that coming, did you? What was the question again?
What are the challenges? What are the challenges you faced? Yes.
In all seriousness, the challenges in this is a couple of things. And to kind of answer this, I want to go back and kind of have you understand what drone services is. Because in all seriousness, drone services is technically the strong arm of logistics for whatever government agency. We build the buildings, we maintain the cars, and most importantly, here at Alameda County has a purchasing power of over $1.2 billion, approaching $2 billion. Drone services, in some way, shape, form, or fashion, has an impact on all of that procurement. And that is a critical aspect that the majority of the community miss. So the big challenge in doing this is reaching out to the community and most importantly being embraced by the community. And one of my mentors, who is actually one of the founders of the National Forum of Black Public Administrators, gave me one of the best pieces of advice. He said, whenever you go into a new community, you gotta seek out the right people in the community and get them on your side. Have them understand what your program is and how you're trying to uplift or enhance the community. And that, in my assessment, has been the most difficult aspect of doing this, because this is my fourth government, my third county, and I had an opportunity to be assistant city manager of a city in South Florida, which was great. But without the community truly understanding and being engaged in what you do, that makes it really, really difficult. And then coming here, what I found it to be even more difficult because of the extreme diversity of this community and the fact that there are multiple chambers of commerce. That makes it even more difficult because you don't have an opportunity to go to one source, tell your story, lay out your plan. You have to go to multiple. But the real challenge is for me in this realm is the community.
Lori, can you weigh in on the challenges that you faced?
yes, thank goodness I don't have to worry about suits and coordination. It's interesting because in this position, one of the things that I've been listening to everybody else's story, you don't realize who's the first, and in this kind of in this century, it's like, really? We're the first of something. I'm the first Black female to run the social services agency, but what's scarier for me when I think about the populations that my agency serves, when I look at the 58 counties in California, oftentimes I go back and I joke with folks and I'm like, I'm in a room with white men in suits. not even women. They're men, and they're talking about women and children, and they're talking about people of color. And to be quiet is what they would like me to be. And to be quiet is very difficult for me in those situations. So my challenge that I often find is finding that line. What is the line? How far am I willing to go? How far should I push so that people actually hear what needs to happen and the changes that need to be made, and when to pull back so that I don't just get to be the angry black woman in the room and, oh, we know what Lori's going to say. And so that has been something I have struggled with, at least in this position, from day one. Just how far can I actually push the envelope with how people view and create policies and practices that impact the lives of people that look like me. I would also say I moved really quickly into this position. So the other thing I struggle with is, and I don't really want to say it here, but I'm going to say it, is age. I was one of the youngest directors when I was hired. I was definitely one of the youngest directors in the state, because I was one of the youngest directors in the state. They had been around for some years. But having people understand that age doesn't really reflect the passion, the knowledge, the level of ingenuity, of ideas that I bring to the table, that there is value, that I have had some experiences. I do know a little bit, is what I usually tell people. I know a little bit. I don't know a lot. I know a little bit. And the little bit I know could actually help somebody else. And that to me is important. But it continues to be something that I struggle with. The one thing I would say, and this is really for people who are beginning their careers, who are just starting out, who may not necessarily get the honor of being the first of something, but just the fact that you're following in somebody's footsteps, it's really figuring out and paying attention to what's going on around you and knowing where you have influence, knowing how to use that influence, knowing when to pull back and take your time and when to forge ahead very, very quickly. All of it is about timing and just paying attention to what's happening around you.
Donna, how would you encourage others to follow in your footsteps?
Well, it's interesting because I think a lot of people have already said it best. So I don't know that I have anything really unique to add to that. So I'll just say briefly, the preparation piece is really, really important. One of my goals for my office right now is the fact that the office, like I said earlier, I've been in the office of the county council for 18 years. I've been the county council for almost 7 years now. In the 18 years that I've been in this office, we have not hired a black male attorney. We currently, and I told you earlier, we have 40 attorneys in the office. We do not have an African-American male attorney in our office. And we have not hired one during the 18 years that I've been there. And there were two when I got there. One retired, and one is now the county counsel in Marin. But in terms of hiring, we've hired tons of attorneys, who have come and gone in those 18 years. We've hired quite a few African-American women. My office is ridiculously diverse in terms of its representation, but that diversity does not include African-American men. And so why is that? Why is that? Well, there are a couple of reasons why that is. One of them is because African-American males are not coming out of law schools in the same numbers as other constituencies. Those that are coming out, particularly from your better schools, are in high demand, and they have opportunities that where they do care about the money that Daniel's passing up. They are going to places where they can get paid because they can. I made an offer to an African-American male about a year ago, and we're being filmed. It was, but somebody may have jokingly referred to him as Randall from This Is Us, but we loved that guy, and we wanted him so badly. And he went, civil service is a complicated interviewing process. And so there are a lot of steps, and he went all the way through. We made him an offer. He said he'd think about it, and he went to work for Salesforce, and turned us down. And so that's what we're competing with to try to get an African-American male. And so when we talk about, circling back to the question I'm supposed to be answering, preparation. And I tell people, I have high standards. If you ask the lawyers who work for me questions about me, they will tell you, I have high standards and I'm willing to live up to the standards that I have for you. So I do want the best talent. I will not just take anyone because then I'm stuck with anyone. And in a civil service environment, I'm stuck with anyone. So I do need, the county pays pretty well for attorneys in the public sector. So for the entire benefit package that we provide, the public deserves a high level of service. And so I'm looking for high caliber people. So preparation, be the best. My son starts law school in the fall, and we had a lot of conversations about where he would go. And he got a variety of different advice. The advice that I gave him was still, one, you're still an African-American man, and two, go to the best school that you can go to. He did not go to the best school to which he was accepted, but he's going to both. So, I'm happy about it. But you have to show up prepared. And I see so few African American men even in my applicant pool. Mm-hmm. So if you know some people, I see. And then once you get in my pool, you have to compare to other people. And so that's the key. Show up prepared. When I interviewed 18 years ago to work for the county, I didn't know anybody in the county. Nobody knew me. There were no phone calls. Nobody, eased my way and said this person's going to come through. I was totally blind. Nobody knew me. But I scored #1 on my civil service exam because I was prepared. There were 5 people sitting in the office in the positions that were vacant. And the intent and the goal was to hire those people. Right. Well, I took one of those spots because my background, my experience, I came prepared. I knew what I was doing, and I was able to show that. And that's the key. I tell people now, if you want to work in my office, call me. I'll do an informational interview with you. I will share knowledge. Call people who work in my office. Call people who work in other public sector jobs. But the key is show up prepared. I won't hire you just because you're black, but I will hire you because you're prepared, and I do care about the diversity of my office. So, give me some choices to make some decisions.
Donna, I'd like to get Joe and Brendon in on that question as well. Thank you, because you've raised a number of really important issues in terms of how do we reach back. Are there any programs? Are there any outreach? What are some of the ways in which, from an HR perspective or also from Brendon's perspective, looking for lawyers, what are the things that you would like to do or are doing to encourage others to follow in your footsteps?
I can go first. So I agree with Donna. Finding African Americans in the legal field right now is extremely difficult. So one of the things we have to do, I think, as department heads and leaders, is be active, proactive, and be out there. So every year, around the recruiting season time for law schools, I go out and I speak to law students myself every year. I think it's important for them to see a black leader, and I convey to them, I meet with the BOLSA groups, the Black Law Association, the La Raza groups, Hispanic Association, Latino associations, and I go to them and say, I'm a person of color, and I'm looking for people of color to come work with us. And so I think it's critically important to be visible and as much as you can to have your hands on the hiring. I am the department head, but I still do all the recruitment myself for the law students as interns. I think it's critical to be out there and see people and bring them in. And then when it comes to encouraging people, I think of the law. I love criminal defense, I love what I do, but just the law in of itself, it is such a powerful tool in so many arenas. Just think about the law, you can create and shape corporations, business. I mean, there's so many things you can do with it. So getting African Americans, black people in law school is critical, and then helping them get through law school is critical, and then getting jobs after that's critical. And I think when I think about how to encourage people to do it, law school is a completely different world. It's a completely different universe. Honestly, I hated it. I couldn't stand it. There were no lawyers in my family. They speak a whole different language. They're like vis loquitur and all this Latin stuff. But when you're there, I think part of it is seeking out help, being aggressive with your professors, saying, I'm not going to leave your office hours to explain this to me, and really being active.
So first I want to just recognize Ava Lavender, the Benefits Division Manager and HRS, lady in purple, just there we go, my team member. She's single, got a wonderful son, and looking, right? So to the extent that encouraging people, I think it's really important that you have a big goal or a big dream. The challenge is that oftentimes those ideas stop there. I've got a cousin who's always said, I want that big mansion and that big car, right? But that's all he ever dreamed of. There were no incremental goals along the way against which to measure your success in achieving that goal. So for me, I never knew it, but I always had incremental goals along the way that I knew gave me an indication that I was on the path to where I wanted to be. And I celebrated every single one, no matter how small. And at every failure, I retooled. So that each one was an opportunity towards that objective. So I tell people when I'm recruiting, no matter what environment that I'm in, that I look for people who are smart and play well with others and don't spill drinks on the table. Because that tells me you have the aptitude to solve difficult problems and that you can get along well with others. If you only have one, you won't be as successful as someone who brings both to the table.
Okay, well, we are entering the speed round. We only have a few more minutes before we go to the questions that are on the, that I'm receiving index cards for. So, I'd like to start with Phyllis. What was your inspiration?
So I tell this story, and we're on speed round. It's kind of a long story, so I'm going to make it short. I tell this story. I tell it to the staff in my office because it really was the thing that changed my thought about being in the child support program. I actually wanted to be Oprah. I think she stole my job. That's what I really wanted to do. I did not want to be a child support person, but I started in the child support field. And there was an employee who was a single mother who had worked in the oil fields in Bakersfield, and that's a pretty big deal because women at the time didn't work in the oil fields, made a really good living, and then she got hurt on the job. And as a result, they retrained her, and they retrained her for a clerical position. She couldn't find a job. Very proud person, didn't want to go back to her parents because she was a single parent and her parents didn't really like that situation. So she found herself on public assistance. If you know when you're on public assistance, they open a child support case. Most people kind of, if you don't know that, that's one of the conversations that happens. And so she had her case opened in our office, but then she came in. I was in Kern County at the time, working in Bakersfield. And she opened her case, she came to work on a temporary position. Time goes by, they finally establish a child support order. Time goes by, they finally locate the father, and they start to get, the first check comes in for her. And so at the time they were printing checks in the office. They saw that she was getting a check. They called her in to give her a check, and you would have thought she had won the lottery. And every time I think about this, I feel an emotion inside, which is what is my inspiration about being in the child support field. Because her check was only like $125. She was making more money. And so she is screaming and she's crying, and we're all looking at her like, okay, what the heck is going on? You're only getting $125. This is not the lottery. And she said, today I get to go home and tell my son, your dad really cares about you. Look what he sent you. And at that moment, I recognized that the work of child support was really more than just a check. It could represent a personal relationship or a feeling of pride for a child. And from that point on, my inspiration is to really make sure, that's my inspiration, to make sure that the work we do at child support creates that type of environment for children each and every day.
Okay, well, we're going to do a speed round. The three, I'd like for you to give me your 3 words of, no more than 3 words of wisdom, okay? So, we'll start on the far end, and if you have 3 words of wisdom, throw them out there.
3 words you get here. Watch or observe, learn, be strategic, and do what you love.
Okay.
Dress well every day.
I'm gonna let that go. My 3 words is 1 word: improve.
3 words. I would say be yourself, love yourself, and never apologize for who you are. So, and again, be prepared. So with that, I'll pass it on to.
Right, before you pass it on, one of the questions, they want to know what country you're from.
Oh, I'm from Ethiopia. It's an African country, so just in case.
As the questioner said, Africa is a very large continent.
I do see that TV show where people are very upset with South Korean leader, and the guy came up with a map and said, "Show us where South Korea is." I can't believe some people were pointing at Texas.
Okay.
Just to make sure, I would say Ethiopia is an northeastern part of Africa.
Okay.
Okay, focus on what matters and what you can control.
Can I just say ditto everybody else before me?
That works.
I actually was sitting here trying to think of something, but I would say live your passion. Think about what, it's not more than 3, but think about what you really love and live that.
And then commit to excellence while you're doing it.
Okay. Well, thank you for giving really sage advice. We have a ton of questions here, and I want to start with one to Supervisor Miley. People want to know, why did you set this up? And why did you set it up, and might you do it again?
Oh, yes. Why did I set this up? Because as a county supervisor, we have quasi-judicial authority, administrative and executive authority, and legislative authority. So we get to hire people who head up departments and agencies that, like Lori said, her agency is 2,500 employees, $800 million. That's one agency in the county. It's the largest. But we've got other county agencies and departments. So I set this up so people could see some of the black people that we've hired and the fact that they have gotten where they've gotten, what's their journey, what's their story, and can we bring others along? And what, might we do this again? Yes.
And then I have all of these questions that relate to folks who want to know specifically, what are you doing to improve the life of black people in Alameda County? What are you doing to improve contracting opportunities with black businesses? What are you doing to recruit African American millennials? What are you doing? You know, you get the message, right? Who would like to begin tackling these questions about specific actions that you're taking related to African American community?
Well, I'm very pleased and proud to say that the County of Alameda, thanks to the leadership of the Board of Supervisors, is really taking a very active role in embracing the criminal justice involved population in the county and offering opportunities for employment. And I'm very glad, is Boss still here? So, and our partnership with Boss to help bring back into the fold, into the work environment, those who've had experiences in the criminal justice system. And Alameda County is a leader in the county, not only in the county, I would say in the state, in embracing the idea that those who have been formerly incarcerated have served their time, they've paid their time, and now they want to move ahead and be a part of the community again. And Alameda County has done a really, I think, has taken a strong leading position in that. And I thank the partnership we have with the community-based organizations, the county, and the departments up here who actually hire the folks that go through the job readiness and want to be a part of the community and have a viable means of employment. So we're really excited about that.
Anyone else want to address the efforts to involve the business community?
To address what we're doing from a contracting perspective, and before I do that, just to comment on one of the things that Joe said, when we look at the reentry program that we're working on for formerly incarcerated people, we're also looking to add that as a component of offering incentive to our existing vendors to reach out and embrace that community as well as a part of our procurement process. But in terms of what we're doing globally, in terms of contracts and procurement, we just recently completed we had a consultant that came on board and assessed our practices. And one of the biggest things we're looking to bring forward is a series of programs that are going to embrace small local businesses beyond what we already have. We're looking at an opportunity to have some procurements that will only be open initially to those small vendors. And if we can't find a small vendor, then we'll look to go elsewhere to procure that service. But if we can find a small vendor that has the bandwidth or the capacity to fulfill that agreement, they will be awarded first. So that's one of the myriad of programs that we're looking at to enhance an opportunity for the local community to get first shot at doing business with the county.
All right. Willie, there's another question that is directed at you as GSA agency director, and it has to do with the RFP process. And if I understand the question correctly, they're wondering why GSA requires more information than the federal or state government that is also providing funding.
Well, there's a simple answer to that question that probably will surprise most of you. A lot of what we do basically because it's the way we've always done it. That's the answer to the question. And the one thing I have constantly said over and over in the time frame I've been here, which is just a little over 2.5 years, is that because we do it that way, we've done it that way, we don't have to do it that way. And a prime example is we typically will post a procurement for 30 days. And that's not a requirement. They don't have to post that long. So there's a series of things that we are continuing to do just because we've always done it. Fortunately, we have a new procurement administrator on board. I basically have a new team within my agency, and that is one of a series of things that we're trying to bring change. As a matter of fact, had an exchange with one of my colleagues up here today about why we're doing something, and I teased her and said, Sam Cooke said a change is going to come, and I said, it's here. And unfortunately, they agreed with the change we made because it makes it more efficient and it makes it faster for them to do what they need to do and not wait on us. So those are the kind of things that we're trying to bring to the table to expedite the process. So the other thing that we really want to do is we're looking to reach out to other sister municipalities and try to create a program, especially, again, for small businesses that basically will allow them to have a different process so there's not so much bureaucracy that is required in order for them to be an approved vendor. We're trying to streamline the process so we don't have to get, you don't have to give me a ton of paperwork for a $25,000 contract, and we're trying to figure out a way to streamline that, but not only do we want to streamline it for Alameda County, once we do it, we want it to be something that you can do also with the city of Oakland and other cities within the county.
We all know that homelessness is a big issue. So there's a question for Lori Cox. The question is, I've heard you have worked also with homelessness. What is it that you learned from outreach related to foster care that can be applied to the homeless population?
Okay, that's a deep question. So I'm trying to correlate the two. One of the things that I would say when you're working with families who are homeless, it's recognizing that there are multiple challenges that they face. And when you're working with children who are in the foster care system, it's the exact same thing. They have multiple challenges that they face, and being able to determine on both ends, and maybe it's kind of the way I blur the two a little bit. Everyone's an individual. Every family is different. There is no cookie cutter solution for one family, for one child, for one individual. We have to be able to look at that person, not just read a piece of paper and say, well, this is what the paper says, these are the boxes that they checked, but really this is who this person is, what their needs are. Have that conversation. I came out, and I said this I think in my opening remarks, I came out of child welfare. I have had history working with homeless families. When I came in through child welfare, it was not unusual to have families who were homeless living in their cars, who were still receiving services through our agency. When I took over the agency, the one thing that I wanted to do was take those case management practices that we learn in child welfare. In child welfare, we talk about engagement of families. We talk about engagement of fathers. We talk about including the child and the family in the decision-making process. That is not something that happens in the eligibility side of the house, the public benefits, the CalFresh or food stamps, the welfare to work programs, the general assistance programs. All too often, a person walks in to receive services, there's a form that they fill out, which is a state form. They check some boxes, they give all of their information to the agency, and a decision has been made on that piece of paper. What we've done in our agency is tried to personalize that relationship a little bit more. We have people who will talk with you. We try to make sure that you can get in and get out quickly. So we've reduced the wait times in our waiting rooms. If you have to turn in something, you can do it electronically, because, let's be real, everybody has a smartphone of some sort. We can't continue to act like people need to fill out things on a piece of paper. We have tried to train our staff on servicing with a heart is one of the trainings that they've gone through, to understand that families are in trauma, and when they come through those doors, they are not having a good day. So what do we need to do to minimize the further trauma that they could experience by that interaction with that the eligibility worker or the social worker or the child welfare worker? So those are some of the things. May not get quite to the homelessness piece. As an agency, our place at the table has been around how do we ensure that people who are homeless are still connected to the benefits that they're eligible for. And how do we bring that to them? Not that they have to come to us, but do we get out there with the teams through healthcare, public health, the cities, to ensure that applications can be completed, that information can go back, and that we're sharing our resources among the agencies.
So is there an effort currently among county departments and others to address homelessness?
Oh, that's a leading question, but yes, there is. So there is... There is a homelessness council, if you will. It is led by our county administrator. It consists of the probation department, the social services agency, the healthcare department, and the community development agency currently. We do get together, I think lately we have met every week, if not every other week, to discuss what we can do strategically across our departments, how do we blend our resources, and how do we set some priorities for the county so that we can assist cities in their efforts to address homelessness. We've also talked about there are times when we need to include some of our other partners, Public Works, General Services, the Sheriff. All of them at some point may need to come to our table on specific issues, but in general, yes, we are coordinating, quite frankly, I think, more so than we have done in many years past.
Okay, great. Another question is, was it difficult to balance family and career? Now, we typically think of this question going to women, in particular single parents. I'd like to have this answered by one of the guys in terms of balancing family and career.
I'm gonna let Brendon answer that. I think he's still married. I'm divorced, so that should answer that question for you.
Okay. Daniel, I think, is still married too, so maybe Daniel and Brendon. And they have children.
Can we go back to the best dressed question? I'm really bad at it. I'm sorry. That's one of the things I struggle with. I think having a job you love, it's a struggle. So I like getting to work at a decent time. I drop the girls off in the morning at school. I get in. I will work till 7:30. I try to get home for a late-ish dinner, have a little bit of time with them, then I go to sleep and I start working again. I turn on SportsCenter and I work. So it's a difficult balance. I try to be good about coaching my girls. They both do sports. I coach them, but it's not easy. And I think all of us probably getting to this place, there is a certain amount of sacrifice you make. And it's, whether it's fair or not, when you're black and you want to be successful in this arena, you have to work hard. You have to prove yourself more. And you have to have an engine inside of you that makes you want to be successful and just overcome everything. And so when that happens, there are sometimes casualties. So like, you know, my girls gonna be like, Daddy, you get home late. I'm like, I know, but sometimes it's part of it. I think what helps me with that is thinking about the job, how much I love it, and how fortunate I am to be in this position compared to my clients. I mean, I have the luxury to make that decision to work more, work harder. Some of my clients don't have that luxury. You know, they're sitting in jail, in prisons, and they need our services. And so I have a lawyer who works a ton of hours, and I always see him when I'm leaving. He's like, boss, you leaving? I'm like, yeah. It's like, I'm not leaving yet. I'm like, why aren't you leaving? It's like, Rita Slopin, I'm not leaving. And so that's kind of our mentality.
Okay, that's real. Donna wants to weigh in.
Yeah, so I will talk about it from the perspective of a single mother. I became a single mother when my children were 1 and 2, and so it was very difficult. And you know, the takeaway for me was I had to make choices. You know, when I became a single mother, I was working in a public job in Southern California. I was working for a public agency. I loved that job. I thought I was going to retire from that job, and then I wasn't, because my household income was cut in half. He had the corporate ladder climbing job. I had a public sector job, and I was committed to providing a certain lifestyle and privileges for my children. So I left the public sector job that I loved and went back to corporate law practice. And so I went back to a law firm. Obviously the money was better, but the hours were crazy. And, you know, it was, you know, do you want to become a partner in a law firm? And, you know, truthfully, that wasn't my passion, and I didn't want to do it. I moved from Southern California back here because this is where my family was. And I could not have done it without that village. And I knew that. And so I had to make the choice to come back to that village. But after 2 years in that law firm, I also had to make a choice for my children. So you know, when you talk about, Joe mentioned earlier about paths, you know, your circumstances will dictate your choices. And what you think success looks like may not be what success looks like at the end of the day. I feel fairly successful in my career. And it isn't, you know, it isn't necessarily, you know, I thought I was going to be a public defender, but I made a conscious choice one day. My children went to visit their paternal grandmother in Ohio, and when for like 2 weeks over the summer, and the kids must have been 4 and 5, something like that. And when they got off the plane, and they ran, you could still go to the gate then, and they ran off the plane, they ran to my mother. That hurt me, because, you know, they were my babies. I did 15 and a half hours of labor. And, you know, but I recognized that in that corporate job, my kids were spending so much time with my mother because I was working 6 and 7 days. I was on a case where our standing meeting was Saturday at 9 o'clock. So, you know, for me, then I knew when my babies ran to my mother, I was like, no, because I want to raise my children. I want to be present in their lives. I want to be the responsible one. You know, I had these children to raise them, not to have someone else do it. So the takeaway for me is you will, you know, it is difficult. It is challenging, but you make choices. And for me, I made choices to make less money, to go and have a somewhat saner practice in terms of hours. But even then, you know, I was trying a case for the county when I was in the county counsel's office. And the judge said he runs 2 trials a day, so the morning trial was going to start at 7 o'clock in the morning. Well, my child care didn't open until 7 o'clock in the morning, and the court was in San Francisco, and, you know, I lived in Oakland, and, you know, I'm looking at the judge, and I was like, Your Honor, you know, I can't be here at 7 o'clock in the morning. I have child care, you know, issues. He's like, you'll figure it out. You know, so, well, I didn't have to figure it out in the end, but I mean, I did. I would have. And so you have to be creative. You have to make choices. But like you sort of said before, if excellence is your standard and commitment, and this is your passion, you know, you have to be innovative. But you know, I'm not going to say it's easy. And one of the things I took away from a women's panel that I went to was, you know, you can't do it all. My house is a mess, okay? Because that, you know, something had to give. And so you just make choices.
Great, thank you.
Donna, if I could, you know, in all seriousness, I am a consummate workaholic, and I think it comes from a series of a couple of things. How I was raised, going in the military reinforced it in that you work until the mission is complete. And in all honesty, that's the reason I am divorced, because I never balanced that. And I think probably the most difficult aspect of it, even after the fact, you know, being in the military, being deployed for months at a time, coming home, you literally miss your children growing up. And even though my children are adults now, when we talk, sometimes my kids will talk about things and go, Dad, you remember that? And my response is, not really. Because even when I was there, because I was constantly working, I wasn't present. So, you know, if there's a failure in my life, that's the failure, and that's the one that I regret most. Fortunately, I've been able to recoup that and, you know, build those relationships with my children. But if I had to do all over again, I would do things differently.
What a profound answer. Lori wants to. Well, you can tell this is an issue that touches everyone, right?
So I felt compelled to answer, because I'm just going to tell you, I have 3 boys, and 2 of them in the time that we've been here have called me twice. So something is going on, because they keep calling. But one of the things that I have to say, you know, it's not easy. When you want to do well, when you want to be successful, I think it's not so much about gender per se. Maybe our roles are a little bit different, but there are sacrifices. One of the things that I don't know if it bothers me or if I find it humorous, but I want to share it because my oldest son says it to me often. One, they are very clear about what I do, why I do it, and understand in many respects the role that they have played in some of the decisions that I've made around children and families. What I used to tell people, and I've told them when they were young and I was working in child welfare, I often use them as my barometer. If this were my child going through X, Y, and Z, what would I want to happen for my child? That helped me make decisions for other people's children. So it was an influence. The other thing I will say is I made a point, my kids all played sports, I never missed a game, ever. And what they will tell you is that I may have been in the stands, my oldest son says all the time, but you were always on your phone. And it's like, yeah, and my staff knew, my supervisors knew, I'm at a track meet, I'm at a football game, I'm at a basketball game. I will give you what you need, but I'm also gonna give my kid what he needs as well. And doing that meant I would interrupt conference calls to scream out my child's name because he's about to win or make a basket or catch that football. And then I'd go right back to the, excuse me, okay, now we can continue because this is what's important and they need to hear my voice in the stand and they need to know that I'm here for them. And that's difficult. It's not something that everybody has the luxury of doing or even has the energy to do. But it's important, I think, as Donna said, and certainly as the gentlemen have said, you make choices. And to remember your kids are watching and they're paying attention. So I don't know if you feel like it's a failure, but I would say your kids know that you love them and that you're there for them. I just felt compelled to say that.
All right, we're going to have one last question. One of the repeated statements is not having people who look like you to emulate. How do we reach invisible communities, invisible in quotes, such as Afro-Latinos and LGBTs? Anyone want to take? Okay. How do we reach invisible communities, such as Afro-Latinos and LGBT?
Well, I don't know if Afro-Latinos or LGBT are invisible. I mean, this is Oakland. This is, we're in this, San Francisco area. So the one thing I love about Oakland is its rich diversity, and we celebrate it. I mean, I walk or jog around Lake Merritt all the time. I see little Asian babies, little white babies, little black babies, and it's a wonderful experience to see that it's genuine and it's not some contrived experiment about what works. It is alive and well. I think you demonstrate that by who you hire, who you promote, what you accept, the circles you play in, the circles you work in, and how you comport yourself when you're there. If it is an anomaly or if you find it uncomfortable being in an environment where folks don't look like you or act like you or comport themselves the way you do, then maybe you need to look within and ask yourself the question, what makes you different?
So I agree with Joe, but I would say that in Alameda County, we have a commitment to diversity, and in that conversation, most of the departments are working on the Government Alliance for Racial Equity. And part of that conversation allows us to really work on our implicit biases that we may have in our own departments and start to address those kind of conversations. In my department, we just showed the film Cracking the Code, which allowed us to have some robust discussions about, do we have implicit bias? What does it feel like? What are we doing in our practices? And I think as we get more educated and we do this more, then I think you will see those invisible communities just being a part of our agencies.
Again, I don't do community service or outreach. That's not what we do. All of the work that we do is primarily internal, and as Nate will know and quote me often saying, I don't do policy, I do law. But I said earlier, my office is ridiculously diverse, my staff. And so while I can't say Afro-Latina people are represented, my LGBTQ community on my staff is well represented, just like, I mean, I can't say how diverse my pool is, but I have gay women, black gay women, Chinese gay women, I have, gay men, and those are just the people I know, because, other people, they're not self-identifying, so I can't say what they are, but literally, I mean, I have people from Sri Lanka. I mean, the one thing I don't have is an African-American male.
Well, I'm getting lots and lots of messages up here about the timing and a few other things, but I want to thank the panel. You've been superb, just phenomenal. I'd also like to remind all of you to complete the evaluation form. And that leads to the next question, which is the final question, Nate. Are you going to do this again?
So before I answer that question, let me just say that these are the African American agency or department heads. Now, that the Board of Supervisors hire. We do have other agency and department heads that are not African American, and we do have other department heads that these folks or their peers that we hire as well. So there's more robust participation and representation in the county of people of color, and particularly African Americans. But as I said, as a county supervisor, one of my goals is always to try to hire people who look like me, because they in turn will hire other folks, and it's kind of like a network and so I was really pleased to be able to put this on today and this evening, and I really want to thank Patricia Brooks right there for she quarterbacked this for me. Kamika, I don't see Kamika anymore. Oh, there's Kamika over there. Kamika's chief of staff. Now, two African American women. Tanya Washington, where's Tanya? Is she still here? Okay, Tanya Washington helped with this. Paul Staffner, Paul's up there. Paul and Kamika are part of my, they head up my communications team, and he was live streaming that this evening, so I really appreciate that. Austin Buchner. Austin, I think, has gone, but he's not. He also helped with this as well. And I definitely want to thank Kevin Jenkins and Justin Webb for helping pull this together this evening. My former chief of staff, Eileen, she was here. Oh, there's Eileen over there. She helped. She works in the Healthcare Services Agency now as a policy director there. So I want to thank Eileen for helping with this. I also want to thank our dinner host, Comcast, for helping underwrite some of the costs of the dinner. Before Geoffrey leaves, Geoffrey Pete, right there, Geoffrey Pete, our host. Geoffrey Pete back there, raise your hand, Geoffrey Pete. Thank you, Geoffrey. And once again, I really appreciate the county agency and department heads here. The county, we have about 10,000 employees. Our budget's about $3 billion. These folks, they have budgets, they have staff, and they influence a lot of policy thinking and direction that the county takes. Obviously, they report to the Board of Supervisors, so we pretty much have the last say. Daniel would probably like to have the last say, but but at this point he doesn't have the last say, and they know from my perspective I try not to micromanage. We hire good people, let them manage and run their agencies and departments. You know, I don't try to interfere with that for the most part. I'm pretty good about that. Yeah. And so I also want to thank Angelica Gums. Angelica right there used to be on my staff. Angelica, she's working in the probation department now. She came out this evening. Another county department head who's here, but the Board of Supervisors we don't hire. She's hired by the Healthcare Services Agency head, who's Colleen. But Kimmy back there, Kimmy's the interim director for our public health department. She's sitting back there as well. Yeah, Kimmy, you want to stand up? Yeah. So like I said, you know, we have the Healthcare Services Agency, but within that agency, we've got environmental health, which is a department, public health, which is a department, behavioral health, which is a department, and then also the office of the director, or the agency head. And so Kimmy's got the public health department in that agency, and so Colleen hires Kimmy. So, in terms of doing this again, yeah, we'd like to do this again. When we were putting this together, we thought about it because there were a lot of questions, and we didn't think we'd have enough time to cover everything. And so phase 2, or the next iteration of this, we'd like to have this same panel come back and talk about, you've heard their stories, how they got to be where they are, and they shared some very personal things that I really didn't know myself. I found it very interesting. But now what we'd like to have them do is come back and talk about, now that they're here in those positions, what are the challenges that they're encountering, and how are they overcoming those challenges? And also, Lori began to touch on some of the stuff this evening about the issues. Somebody asked a question about homelessness. What are some of the issues that they're addressing at this point in time? That, you know, like procurement. Willie's talking about procurement a little bit, but let's get more into that, more in depth into those issues that they're dealing with that are contemporary now. So it's both looking at the issues and the concerns, but also the challenges that they're facing now that they've arrived to where they are. And you know, I talked to Lori about a week or so ago about this, and Lori said, well, you know, I'm still on my journey. It hasn't stopped here. So maybe they might even talk about, well, the next iteration of where they consider themselves going beyond just the county of Alameda. So, and it was really fascinating too to hear Donna, Lori, and Brendon all say when they came to the county and got hired, they said they were going to lead their agency or department. And lo and behold, look at them. They're leading their agency and department. So anyway. And then depending on how people like this, you know, we could bring back county department heads like Kimmy and others who are not hired by the Board of Supervisors, but have departments that they oversee that have budgets. What's your budget, Kimmy? About $100 million. How many employees? 600. So, you know, here's somebody who's appointed by or hired by her agency head, who the Board of Supervisors hire. She's got a budget of about 100 million, 600 employees. So it'd be good to hear, you know, their journey as well, and their story, I think, would be fascinating. So we might consider doing that as well. And finally, like I said, I want to thank all of you for coming this evening. Please fill out those evaluations. I want to thank Donna Linton once again for moderating. She said it was a lot of fun. Like I said, I can't say enough about Donna, because you just don't know. You just don't know. Donna might interact with these folks when she was the assistant county administrator in different capacities, but I know when I'm talking to Donna and we're in closed session, we're doing stuff, and it's the heavy lifting, and it's trying to get like a project through, a project that an African American was pursuing, a multi-million-dollar project, and there was pushback from other county agencies and departments. Who was carrying the water on that and making it happen? Donna Linton. So you just don't know what happens behind the scenes. So it's always good to have good people like Donna and good people like these folks in their positions. So thank you. Thank you all.